Welcome to the Seahawks Draft Blog live stream instant reaction show. Rob Staton, Adam Nathan, Robbie Williams here. And I tell you what, guys, what a fantastic idea that was to have DJ Dallas throwing the ball on a wildcat trick play. Just inspiring from the Seahawks today. I hope they've kept that in the playbook for future weeks because that was absolutely fantastic. But on a serious note, everybody's written them off and they haven't written back. And that was awful. Robbie, what did you make of it?
Yeah, man, where do I start? Do I want to start on defense or do I want to start on offense? Listen, you're going to have Geno throw the ball 31 times. I kind of get why they had to because the defense couldn't stop anybody. They were running all over us. I got flamed a little bit last week on our podcast, Rob, when I said I'm a little worried about San Francisco running game. People were, Elijah Mitchell's out. No, it's not going to matter. And they ran for almost 200 yards on us today, and we couldn't tackle worth a damn. So, all around just piss poor performance. Other than one exciting play, we were blocked a field goal. Nothing to be excited about. I mean, I think this is the team we are. I mean, this is last week was kind of a fluke, and we caught Denver. Well, maybe not. Denver's not playing all that great right now, but we kind of caught them at a good time, and we'll see how the rest of the season goes. It's not looking pretty.
No, I'll bring you in a second, Adam. I just want to highlight a couple of things here, though. First of all, what we actually saw. Tackling, again, has been awful. It's been awful in preseason. It's been awful to start the season. It was awful here. Blown coverages, I guess they're going to be a thing when your starting strong safety is injured, Kelsey Breeze, after 1 week, and you are starting rookie players at cornerback. But blown coverages, ill-disciplined. A lot of the same defensive issues that we've seen in previous years, we're still seeing. And there's not a great deal I've seen in 2 weeks of this defense that makes me feel it's any really that different to what it was last year. And the pass rush is still, I'm waiting to see it. And players like Uchenna and Wosu, good for him. He's had a really good start. Where's Darrell Taylor? What is Darrell Taylor doing? We were hoping that he was going to take a step forward this year. It's not happening. On offense, they haven't scored a point in 6 quarters. No points, 6 quarters. Everything that they showed in that first half against Denver appears it was all down to the benefit you get of that week 1, being able to prepare and script and have everything ready. Or maybe Denver's just nowhere near as good as everybody thought. It could be a bit of both. But we've seen nothing from them for 6 quarters now. Geno Smith completes the odd pass, but he's Geno Smith, isn't he? And one of the worst things for me is they don't have any idea how to get DK Metcalf involved. They've paid him all this money, and yet the game plan, they've done a decent job getting Tyler Lockett involved, but you've paid DK Metcalf an absolute king's ransom. You'd think they'd have a set of plays short of a trick play downfield, which gets called back because of a rookie error, to get him involved. They just don't have it. And then, Pete Carroll's saying they want to run the heck out of it. How many times has he said that in preseason? They can't run the ball. And one of the main reasons they can't run the ball is nobody respects their passing game. Everyone's just loading up the box. They're taking risks. We've lost Robbie. We'll come back to him in a second. Hopefully he's going to be back. So they're taking risks against them, Adam, and there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing. You could see when Jimmy Garoppolo came into the game, he was just sort of throwing it downfield, and it was almost like a reckless abandon, really, with San Francisco attacking Seattle. It was just really bad. Adam, you have your say.
It's a bit of a game of two halves for me, and I feel that both sort of encapsulated what you may have feared you'd see from the Seahawks this year. I mean, starting with the second half, where they probably didn't make as many silly mistakes, but they look like a team where really there's a lot of role players there that can sort of do the job that's required, but do the job that's required when they're studied by star players to kind of make something happen. Like the second half, the team sort of just existed. Like the half just happened. They didn't score a point on offense. They didn't really look like scoring a point on offense. The defense was okay. I think the loss of Shelby Harris didn't help with the running game, but there was no star talent there, which I suppose is what we're looking for going forward in the draft, they'll add that star talent. But the first half was the concern for me, because everything that Pete Carroll preaches about how he wants his team to play and be solid and do the basics well. I mean, there was a game last year where I think Pete almost stormed off the podiums in his press conference saying, that wasn't us. I didn't recognize us. He must have been apoplectic at halftime because it was a clown show. And I guess that's kind of if you were looking at the worst part, the worst case scenario for this season, you could say, well, it's not a great team. They have to be completely healthy. They're already down Jamal Adams and Shelby Harris from the defense today. And as a result, they kind of look like a bit of a JV team, which is what they were at times really today.
But this is the thing, though, isn't it? This is us. This is what the Seahawks have been for a while. The only difference now is they don't have a quarterback capable of bailing them out. This game, a few years ago, if it had been 13-0, whatever it was in the second quarter, they'd have pulled something out and Russell Wilson may have dragged them out and they may have won this game. I mean, if you remember the game in San Francisco last year, in Santa Clara last year, they were awful in the first quarter. They couldn't do anything. They got themselves in a hole and then they gradually dragged themselves out. Russell Wilson had that amazing touchdown. Look, I don't want to... Every week that they lose, I'm not going to say Russell Wilson might have given them a chance to win that. But this is the point I'm trying to make here is this is the Seahawks. This is what the Seahawks have become under Carroll. The only difference is now is Geno Smith is the quarterback and he can't elevate. He was far from the worst thing today, Geno Smith, but he's the quarterback. That's the most important position. On a day like this, when you are not playing very well, you need your quarterback to be able to make a bit of magic. And I've got Red Zone on in the background here. And just before we came on, I've not been following Red Zone because I've been watching the Seahawks. I thought the Bengals were going to lose. I thought they'd lost against Dallas. And then I had a looked up and they were scoring a 2-point conversion to tie the game in Dallas. And despite being horrendous, it looks as if the fact they have the quarterback has dragged them back into it. And then they flick to the Cardinals, and Kyler Murray's just scored the most amazing 2-point conversion anyone will ever score. They're driving to try and tie the game now. It's in those sort of moments that you need sort of the difference maker, and the Seahawks don't have it. But this is what the Seahawks are. And my sort of concern, Adam, when you say stuff like, and Pete says, I don't recognize this team. I do recognize this team. And when I see a performance like that, I'm not sure that just throwing in a cheap rookie quarterback next year is going to be the cure-all. I think that we'll still just be seeing the same thing with a rookie quarterback who might actually not be coming into a great situation as a consequence. Robbie, what do you think?
No, I agree. About the only bright side on bringing in a rookie quarterback is just, if we could find a way to get DK and Tyler more involved, because they're clearly two of the best players on the team, we still need that third wide receiver. But if Pete's going to run his game, run the football, don't throw it 31 times with Geno and I don't even know how many rushing attempts we had. It felt like we only had 10 or something. I haven't looked at the stats, but I'm sure it's not very many. It was crazy. I was really hoping to see Kenneth Walker Jr. more today. But there's a lot of holes. We're missing a lot of pieces. I don't think a quarterback's going to come in to solve the problem. There's a lot of things that we're going to need. And we're looking at this is no longer a retool. I don't buy the retool anymore. It's a rebuild, full on.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I want to talk a little about last week and how I think it impacted this. But on the running stats, 14 runs for 36 yards today. Rashad Penny, 15 yards from 6 carries. Remember when he was running the ball effectively at the end of last year? Look at what it was today. We've got this from Darth Soldier, great supporter of the channel. Darth, great to have you with us again. Al Woods was the only good player on defense other than one fluke block punt. The offense stinks. Well, 0 points suggest you are right. If you have a super chat, you want to send it in if you've got a question. And again, as with last week, if you have any draft questions as well, I'm happy to answer those. But we are only going to refer to super chats in the live chat. So if you want a question answered, then send one in. And I think Darth sent another super chat in. So double appreciation for Darth. You can't get Tyler and DK involved with a quarterback who can't pass more than 12 yards. Yeah, it wasn't very good. Adam, I personally felt a bit of concern this week. And I did a video about it. And I got absolutely hammered. There was a 5-page thread on Seahawks.net tearing me to shreds because I did a video which said I was a little bit concerned that the Seahawks had enjoyed the win against Denver too much, that essentially they were borderline gloating about the fact that they'd beaten Russell Wilson. I did a little graphic which had a banner raised in Lumen Field which said "Beat Russell Wilson 2022." It did feel a little bit like the reaction to that game was a bit OTT, and that maybe the Seahawks had put a little bit too much into that game, and it was almost treating it like it's Super Bowl, like the one game it had to win this season. And I really wanted to beat the Niners today, and it felt, I don't know, it just felt a little bit like this was very predictable what happened in this game. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, do you care? I've seen a lot of people, I suspect there's a lot of people out there who don't really care, that they actually quite just, people seem to hate Russell Wilson. I think you're one of them now, who kind of just, they dislike Wilson so much that they just were so happy to win that game last week that if they go 1-16 for the rest of the year, they won't care. They'll just be glad that they won last week. So give me a take.
I certainly don't hate Russell Wilson to the binary level that the expense of the team for the rest of the season makes no difference. I think the reason that I wouldn't be, I'm not going to say I don't care, but if the team go 1-16, I think I won't be gutted about it, because I think I said on the show 2 weeks ago that it wouldn't stun me if the team did only win a couple of games, because of the way in which the only way they can win really is how they did on Monday. And that's relying on the moments to go their way. Like when they lose against better teams, it's going to be ugly like today. They were just outmatched by a better team. And it's difficult to have many answers for that unless you're under the lights and you get a big emotional game like they had on Monday. I think, unfortunately, today is going to be sort of the regression to the norm against a lot of good teams, which is why I think we said also, what a blessing to be able to play the Broncos on Monday night on the first game of the season under the lights, because a 105 start in a 65-degree Seattle could have been a bit of a disaster. But I'm not that fussed, because again, it doesn't overly surprise me. It's not that I don't care. I don't want the team to go 1-16. Of course I don't. But I do think that as long as we can see green shoots for the season, and if we can see players that you can sprinkle into a better team, and I think in Nwosu and Maffei and Cross and Woolen, like, at least I feel like I'm seeing something that I can get my teeth into for the future. Maybe that is so, scraping the barrel for positives that I should be, castigated for being a happy clapper. But there's part of me that thinks that as long as I can see something that I can get excited for going forward, it's not going to be 2011. That's never going to happen. That needs to be eradicated from the parlance, because that's a nonsense. I'm sorry for this sort of rambling answer, but I feel like I'm seeing enough just about that I can say, right, well, add one of them's there and he's there, and then add this there and that there. There might be something. I don't think it's a complete dumpster fire outside of the fact that players in key positions just aren't really up to winning in the NFL. And even having two wide receivers, well, that's not enough anymore, especially if you haven't got a good quarterback. Like, that's pretty easy to scheme against, I would imagine. And we've seen it often enough. You need 4 or 5 guys that you can sprinkle in there that can contribute. Just having 2 guys, I think we've seen for long enough now, isn't really enough to move the needle that much.
So I don't think you are a happy clapper or anything like that. And whenever you have young players, I mean, for me, I think the promise of the youth within the team, it has to be something we clutch onto a little bit, because what else is there to clutch onto right now, frankly? So if Tariq Woolen plays well, I mean, I don't think the promise of Tariq Woolen right now is probably better than the reality, but he's very young, he's very raw, so you hope that he develops. William had a nice play. I mean, I don't feel like I've seen enough of him yet to sort of say, okay, he's a great positive, but we all know what he's capable of, and therefore you hope that something really special comes off. And then some of those other guys, it's the same sort of thing. We hope that the bookend tackles will become good. So I think we have to sort of invest some hope in those players developing. And in the case of like someone like Abraham Lucas, I genuinely think he will, because I've seen a lot of him in college and think that he will be very, very good. My concern, and it segues brilliantly into this super chat that's come in from Kyle, who says, "Hey, Rob and Kyle, thank you for your support and for sending that super chat in. Hey, Rob, thanks for all you do with the channel and the blog. I was just curious, even if we have 2 high first round and second round picks, do you trust this coaching staff to develop them? That is my concern. You can draft players who are good, and I think they had an A+ draft this year. Are the right people in place to make the most of those picks? And I think it's a conversation we should have. I don't think we should just assume Carroll's not going anywhere, therefore we can never discuss this. And I accept there's probably very little chance that Carroll will be fired unless this team goes 1-16 and maybe he has a fall on his sword moment. I don't know. I don't expect him to depart. But are they the right people right now to invest that faith in, that they're going to develop and turn this team around? Because in order to have that kind of faith, Adam, I want to see this defense playing better than it has done. Great. They're great in the red zone. Good for them. I want to see pressure. I want to see turnovers. When's the last time you could rely on the Seahawks to turn the ball over? They've not been a good turnover team for years. They've not been a good pass rush team for years. On the offense, I want to see the coaching staff on this team have a better plan than when we get into the red zone for the first time, we're going to take the quarterback off the field, put 4 running backs in the backfield so that all San Francisco have to do is have a wall of bodies in front and then just leave a couple of guys back in coverage. And if they give it to DJ Dallas, he's just going to look up and throw it straight to the defender. There has to be a better plan than that. And when I see that trick play in that moment, I can't have faith in this coaching staff. I look at that and think, no, the right people are not in charge of this team to move it forward. And if they try that trick, if they're 21-0 up against Atlanta next week and they try something like that, or if it's a close game and they roll in and they feel good about offense and they try something like that, yeah, that's fine. When you're trailing by 2 touchdowns, you have got nothing going for you. You finally get into the red zone and you come up with that. And not just that, but you do it twice. You do one wildcat play that doesn't work, then you do it again, but you throw it with DJ Dallas. Who's making that decision? And Shane Waldron deserves responsibility for designing that because presumably he designed it or sanctioned it. And Pete Carroll deserves criticism for saying, I'm okay with you doing that right now. Robbie, that's the issue I have. And stuff like that, and the way that they're playing on offense and the fact that it can't do anything, how is that developing anybody? How is that offensive performance today developing anybody? And that's my concern, what Kyle raises there. Do I trust them to, even if they have all the pieces, do I trust this staff in this day to move this team forward? And I cannot answer that with a big fat yes right now.
I mean, unfortunately, we said this last year. This is the same conversation we had last year. We didn't trust the staff last year. And when it came down to knowing whether it should be Pete or Russ, originally we were on the let's see what Russ can do with an offensive coordinator or an offensive minded head coach, and it's time for Pete to go, or let Pete kind of play that advisory role and step out of the role of making the decisions. I don't trust the staff either. I don't. And I agree with you. I really liked their draft this year, but unfortunately the talent just doesn't seem to be developing quite like they should be. And, there are some bright spots. So, I'm not knocking Pete or anything like that, but I do think there's been some things that he could have done better. And, I think he gets a little too cute with thinking that he can outsmart everybody else. And, we've talked about that in the past as well, how he treats the fan base and those kind of things. I just don't trust it. I don't trust it going forward. And I'd like to see some changes. And I just don't see it happening anytime soon.
Well, here's the other thing, Adam, is I'm kind of looking at the other teams. So there's other teams who may be in similar positions to Seattle. So Detroit lost last week. They didn't play as badly as Seattle played today, but they lost to the Eagles. And then they won today. They have a new coaching staff. So automatically, as a fan, I think they have a little bit more rope. And it helps that they've had a positive experience with Hard Knocks and stuff like that. But when you have a new staff in, you give them a bit of rope, don't you? So if this was a new coaching staff in Seattle and that had happened today, you can go, oh, that was really ugly, but they need a bit of time to work this out. They need a bit of time to sort of sift through this. And then you look at other teams. So the Giants are 2-0, for example, but they've got a new staff. Again, you kind of you will give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit when things go awry. Jacksonville, they hammered the Colts today. But again, you know, Doug Peterson's in his first year there. I don't think if he has a bad result like they kind of did last week, that anybody's going to be wanting to hound him out. And I mean, even the Jets pulled one out the bag today against Cleveland, and Browns blew it. And maybe it's bad karma on their behalf, but you kind of, do you see where I'm coming from? Like, there's a newness to coaching staffs that make you think they need a bit of time. You know, you can't just judge them on this. Whereas with Pete Carroll, he's been here forever now. And, you know, you would think with an experienced coach like that, who's been there and done it and seen everything there is to see in football, that you would avoid the mistakes of asking DJ Dallas to do that trick play, that you would avoid some of the clumsiness of this performance. And look, they're playing young players, so there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be rookie mistakes, there's going to be issues like that. But it felt to me like it was a little bit more than is reasonable to expect from a team in this position from the Seahawks today. There was just too much that just made you want to, if you had any hair, pull your hair out. You know, that's you two will have been far more feeling that way than me today.
Look, I think we've said a number of times on this show that you know, up to last year, probably didn't want Pete Carroll to still be the head coach. I feel like once you get to this offseason and what happens, it's the same people in the same positions, but it does kind of seem like you could almost draw a line under it and say, well, this is, you know, Pete Carroll's Seahawks 2.0. And whilst it's not their first game and second game like it is Nathaniel Hackett, the mindset of how they're coaching the team does appear to be very different to what it was under Russell Wilson and how they're going to approach games. So after you have the win on Monday, which, let's be honest, probably proved hugely validating to Pete, and it probably made him think, oh my goodness, I am a genius. I've done it again, and look how good we're going to be. And it's, you know, no one was talking on Tuesday morning that we hadn't scored a point in the second half, that we barely even made a first down in the second half, because the story was the win. It was the clock management from the Broncos. It was, what a night. Why are you booing? Should you boo? Should you not boo? If you got into the nitty gritty, there were problems on Monday. And the only thing I can hope today is that they look at the second half on Monday, they look at the game today, and they think, right, well, we've got a bit of a problem here, and we have to do something about it. Now, that's going to go one of two ways. They're going to be able to solve it, or Pete is just going to have his Kool-Aid bubble burst, and in a private moment is going to sit down and think, oh my goodness, what have I done? Because we know that he's not got much accountability in that building. There's no one that's going to grab him and sit him down and say, what's going on? So I don't really know how you look at it. I mean, you have to hope that he can self-analyze and self-reflect well enough to think, I've got to do something about this, because obviously today was not, you can't go 6 quarters without scoring a point. I mean, that it's the modern NFL. It's never been easy to score points on offense, and that's where we are. So I'm not so fussed at the fact that it's the same coaches that should do better, because I thought the old coach, they should have been sacked in the first place, but they're here now. So what are we going to do? For me, it's what are they going to do about this situation, and how are they going to make this better? Because if they can't, the leash should be super short, as if it was a first-time coach with no pedigree.
Yeah, and I think from our point of view that the leash should be short, and you're right. And with the Broncos game, if Denver manage that situation better and go for it, I mean, the way that Russell Wilson was checking down and getting 5 yards, as easy it was to blow his own nose, then you would have thought that if they convert that 4th down, they get an easier kick. Seattle's 0-2, and we're having a very different conversation tonight. I mean, that one win has really, and you're right. I think that's part of the issue, Adam. You've really brought up the meat of the topic here, I think, by sort of Pete's reaction to, I mean, he was on the radio saying it takes a team, not one man. I mean, it was all flowing out, wasn't it? You know, oh, we brought all of those guys back because, you know, they really wanted to win this game. Why did they really want? Well, you work it out, guys. You know, it was kind of like Pete was at his most confident, and he was just sort of exuding justification for that win. But that's all well and good. You've got to back it up. You know, it can't be the season was not one game last week against Russell Wilson. And again, if Carroll had have set the stall out this year, that this is going to be the kind of year that we've all kind of expected, and I'm very prepared for. You know, I'm not someone who wants necessarily a winning record or else, but I do want to avoid experiences like we had today and decisions that were made today. And it's stuff like that wildcat thing and the bad tackling and the defensive issues that have continued for so long. And as you said there, Adam, an offense that just cannot. I mean, it didn't look like scoring today and in the second half against Denver. It's not that it's got to the red. I mean, like I was watching Miami against Texas A&M. Miami got into the red zone about 4 or 5 times in that game and came away with like 1 field goal. Like, that's just bad execution in the red zone. Denver in the red zone on Monday night and at times today, they've been bad in the red zone. Seattle aren't even getting close. They're not sniffing the red zone. They're not getting close to it. They're not even threatening to score a point in the last 6 quarters. That is what bothers me. And frankly, I think the correct answer to should it have been Russ to go or Carroll was probably both, and have a fresh start and move forward. And I think it's a conversation we should be willing to embrace and have. It won't be embraced and it won't be had, because the assumption is always with stuff like this that Pete's not going anywhere. There's no point talking about it. That's often the sort of the approach in Seattle. But that felt to me like a very 2009-ish performance from the Seahawks. We've had this super chat from Slacker Hero. Having to watch Pete ball for another year, but this time without Russ really stinks. I appreciate all Carroll has done for the franchise, but it's time to move on. The fans deserve a fun team. And Squatch says, odds of DK staying content after games like this. Well, I mean, he is a lot richer, Squatch, so that will obviously ease the pain somewhat. But Robbie, that is a fair point, isn't it? I mean, surely there's only going to be. This is a man who, in the offseason, said he wants his aim is the Hall of Fame. I can't imagine sort of many more of these 20, 30-yard games for DK Metcalf are going to be enough for him.
No, he didn't look content in the second quarter. He was throwing his water bottle. He looked all upset, and clearly there was something going on. I don't know with his hand or back, but he was already pretty fiery. So I can imagine it just getting worse and worse. And listen, he made a fantastic catch that unfortunately was called back due to Abe Lucas just being too badass. I mean, that's an unfortunate thing where, a rookie tackle is taking his guy past the 5-yard line and he's throwing him down to the ground and they get a penalty for that. Unfortunately, I think that's just I think that's a really dumb call. It's the right call, but it's just dumb. And he made a great play. And I think that was a real big momentum killer, but I could see a scenario where he's going to really start getting fiery on the sidelines and it's going to get messy if they don't, figure out a way to get the ball in his hands a little bit more. And, I see a lot of people have already started asking, when is it, when are they going to turn to lock? When those kind of things. And I just don't see it's going to happen. I mean, I think Pete's going to stand behind Geno for a while. I mean, he I don't know what his stats were. I should look him up, but I mean, he wasn't terrible. I mean, he made some weird kind of throws that, he should have been picked off more, but I mean, I think he's going to stand behind Geno just simply for kind of what Adam was saying for that first game and living off that, that was, we brought all these guys in, and I would have really liked to see Pete actually come after that game and just be like, it was just a game. Like there's no reason to celebrate it more than any other game. And I felt like he took it probably a little too far. But you're right. The back to the question, I think DK, he isn't going to handle it much. And you could see it today already that he was getting fired up. So it won't take long before he gets real pissy about it.
Well, I the offense is just, I don't get it. I don't understand, Adam, what the plan is. What exactly are they trying to do? They want to run the ball. Okay, well, if you want to run the ball and that be your focal point, you have to give teams a reason to keep you honest. Like, where are the plays to get, the specific design plays to get the ball in DK's hands to say, okay, we're going to make sure that he has X number of touches in this game. Where's the play design to put the ball in his hands? We see teams over and over again feed these world-class receivers, even without you don't necessarily need Aaron Rodgers to get the ball to a certain receiver. We see them being fed. I mean, look at the guy Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit. He's got Jared Goff throwing to him. How many yards did he have today and last week? You can figure out ways to get the ball to your key players. The Seahawks seem incapable of getting the ball to DK Metcalf and scheming that out. Can they come out and, did they mix the tempo at any point today? It didn't look like it. It just looked like a really basic, boring offensive ideology that they were going to come out and hope for the best, that they could run the ball, and that would they'd be able to play off everything with that. As soon as they get behind in a game, they're going to have to abandon the run. And Geno Smith, he had some quite pretty throws today, didn't he? I mean, he had some plays where he got on the move and he threw it to Tyler Lockett, who did a great job getting open. And, maybe more credit goes to Lockett for that than Geno Smith. I mean, he completed 24 or 30 passes, but he's only got 197 yards. He had one interception. I think he should have had two. I don't know what you two think. I mean, if that pass interference had been against Seattle, we'd have been fuming. I mean, that just looked like a really good tipped play to me. And it was just caught. But again, there just doesn't seem to be anything remotely interesting, exciting about this offense. And without wanting to flog a dead horse with this, I wrote something before the season started that if you're going to draft a rookie QB, at least have an offensive vision that, that can come in and excite them and make the best of them. If you put Will Levis or CJ Stroud or Bryce Young or whoever into this offense, I don't really think I don't think it'll change that much, quite frankly, because it's not particularly well schemed.
It's funny, I literally changed my entire answer whilst listening to your question and trying to process what I've seen today, because I was going to say, well, there's a reason people pay $50 million a year for quarterbacks. And that's because this idea that Pete can just trot anyone out, snap, drop 3 steps and just pick up the open guy is fanciful nonsense, to be honest. And it's very quick to, defensive coordinators get paid a fortune to work out how not to do that. And the reason that people beat defensive coordinators is because they have top quality guys at quarterback. And then I think that 15 minutes before watching the Seahawks start playing, Joe Flacco ripped apart a defense that probably would be seen as better than the 49ers, or at least on a level with the 49ers. So whilst initially I was thinking, well, it's a players game, and if you haven't got the players, what do you expect? Perhaps you're completely right. Well, you are completely right, but perhaps I should be more annoyed than I am, because in my head I'm thinking, well, there's no quarterback, so there's no chance. But then we've just watched, as you say, Jared Goff has thrown for a load of yards today. Tua, I know he's got great receivers, but he's underthrown them all, and they're still hauling in 6 touchdown passes from him today. And the Seahawks don't even look like they got a sniff of crossing the halfway line, despite the odd pretty pass. So there must be a schematic thing going on, and this idea that, well, run the ball, play action, pick up the open guy, it's just not that easy. And if it was, everyone would do it.
Yeah, and they have to be able to score more than this. But then the other thing, Robbie, is defensively, I still think if you were to say right now that not a great deal changes, and I'm sure there will be games like Darrell Taylor's not going to go sackless all year. Like there'll be games where I'm guessing Darrell Taylor, I don't know, does something. But right now I'm looking at this team and I'm thinking, yeah, they need a quarterback. They also need a difference maker on the defensive line. They need the good teams we see with Bosa today. The really good teams tend to have somebody who you can just trot out there and they cause an opponent massive issues just with their mere presence. And we don't seem to have anybody like that. There's no real star on this defense, is there? And I don't know how you're quite going to acquire one, because those types of players very rarely make it to free agency. And if you're going to draft one, I think if you need a quarterback, you're not going to be drafting that defensive player first, are you? You're presumably going to be drafting the quarterback. So where are you going to get that player from? And without that kind of player, can this defense work? Because I was kind of thinking it's going to be Vic Fangio. It's going to be aggressive. It's going to be pressure from everywhere. And whether it was Trey Lance or Jimmy Garoppolo, I thought this would have been an ideal game to sort of really get after San Francisco, because their O-line's not that great. And Jimmy Garoppolo is not a particularly evasive player. And Trey Lance, I think if you get in his face, he would have made mistakes. I didn't really see them getting after San Francisco today, did we? I mean, maybe they did and they just didn't get home. Maybe I need to study that again.
You know what I would actually like to see is the number of missed tackles. I actually think the defense, if they would just wrap up and put somebody on their ass instead of letting them get by them. The announcers today were like, "Oh, you're just going to make that one first guy miss, and then you've got plenty of yards to make up after that." And I'm like, well, why aren't we just wrapping up? I feel like 2 games in a row now, the defense has just been, they've been trying to do either the big hit or whatever. They're just not making solid tackles. If they just wrap up, I think the defense would be a heck of a lot better. They'd give up a heck of a lot less yards. I'd like to see the stat on that, because I mean, it's absolutely asinine the amount of missed tackles that we have. It's unacceptable for a Pete Carroll defense to have that many missed tackles. And this is kind of where I blame some of that on Pete. If he's going to be the defensive coach, or if he's going to be that kind of like, leader on the defense, he's got to get his guys ready to tackle. And they're missing the mark 100% on it.
Yeah, he had that face, didn't he, Adam, today, Pete Carroll? That one where I don't really understand what's going on. That look of having no answers to the questions being posed was there several times.
Yeah, I think the defense for me today was summed up by the fact that, I mean, Al Woods was probably the best player on the defense by far. And when you're a really good team, you can be like, oh, wow, that's so cool that like we're really good and it's the old boy popping up and he's doing it for us. But when you're a team that's trying to reinvent itself from the ground up, the last thing you want is the oldest bloke who's not going to be there next year, more than likely, to be the best player, because you're kind of looking around thinking, well, everyone else the young guys are supposed to be doing what he's doing, not this guy showing the rest of them up, because he looked on a different level to the rest of the linemen, which is pretty worrying.
Very much so. There was another point I was going to ask you guys about, and I'm just trying to remember what it was. And there's all sorts of issues to get into with a performance like that. I'm trying to find it. Oh yeah, that was what I was going to bring up. Robbie, did you see this before the games began today? I was going home from somewhere, racing back to get there in time to watch Red Zone, and I wasn't driving. And I had a look at my phone, and someone had retweeted this thing. I think Schefter or somebody had put it out, or that Pete Carroll showed the players a presentation about the unbeaten Dolphins from whenever they went unbeaten many decades ago, and to tell the team that it was possible for the Seahawks to achieve that this year. And I just thought, what an utter load of bollocks.
Yeah, I saw it. It was on ESPN. It was a highlight article. I was like, wait, what? And when I read that, I literally just laughed. It was the most ridiculous thing. I mean, hey, all right, you used it and you got them to win the first game. But to think that you could, I mean, I don't know. It was pretty ridiculous, to be honest. I don't know. Adam, did you see it?
I didn't see that, thankfully, because I think that may have been enough for me to need to buy a new TV tomorrow morning.
Yeah, apparently in 1972, the unbeaten Dolphins, and he tried to, explain to the team that it was possible. Stuff like that, though. I mean, you do wonder what the Seahawks what are the players going to be wondering when you do stuff like that, if they do end up sort of like 1-6? Because I'd imagine that'd be the kind. I mean, if it was just me, that'd be the kind of thing that you might have a bit of a laugh behind the coach's back about. Can you remember that meeting we had about 17-0 before the season began? Like, look at us now. Yeah.
I say one more thing about that, Rob. I just this is kind of one of the problems that I have, that he went back and used this story and to try to motivate his guys. That makes me think he honestly believes that this team is good enough to win the Super Bowl right now, which worries me that he's not looking at it realistically. Like, that's the kind of thing that makes me think we don't have the right coaching staff in place. Look, I love having the motivation and wanting to get your guys fired up to go and having that, wanting to have that belief, but you also have to be realistically. And I just don't think he's looking at it. He's looking at it with shaders on. He's not seeing it for real. And I think that's the problem that bothers me.
Yeah, I've thought this because a lot of people have said, you can't expect the coach, Adam, to come out and say, we're going to be bad this year. It's a rebuild, but stick with us because we'll get out the other side and have a high draft pick. That's never going to happen, and I've never expected that to happen. I had hoped that Carroll might couch his language a little better, during the last few weeks, because he has sort of really ramped it up about going after it, competing, doing all, having a team capable of doing something, and they haven't, have they? And that to me is like, okay, if, it just seems so ridiculous to go too over the top with it, that when the inevitable happens and the team proves to be as good as everybody expects, you've made a rod for your own back. It's very easy for people like me, I suppose, to criticize a coach who is so insistent they're going to do well when they don't.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And I almost feel like I'm coming across like a Pete Carroll apologist this evening, which probably flies in the face of every other appearance I've had on this show. But the only thing I'll say to counter that is that, having spoken to former and current players on the team, they absolutely love it. Like, they adore him. And they adore the mindset. And every time you ask them, like, what's different about playing in Seattle versus everywhere else, they say, "Oh my goodness, the culture that Pete creates. It's where I want to be. It's where I want to play. I would have retired if it wasn't for this." So obviously, it's difficult for us, and more difficult for us, because ultimately Pete Carroll tells us absolutely nothing. He talks to us, but he tells us nothing. So we don't really get much of an insight from him as to what's going on. But if it's, I don't know what would be better. If you'd be better off to have a whole new system in place and a whole new set of guys, even just new coaches that maybe coach these guys better, in inverted commas, but it's someone like a Nathaniel Hackett who might have lost his locker room already from some bad, some bad coaching, or is this kind of Emperor's New Clothes idea that, if you keep reinforcing this idea that you're great and things are going to be okay and play for the guy next to you, given that it's probably quite a short-term thing this season, like this is going to be a bridging season for next year, I don't know, like, is that worse than a bit more home truth? Honestly, I don't know the answer. I'm throwing it out there, but I just wonder if the kind of Kool-Aid for 1 year and 1 year alone is maybe the best way to go.
Perhaps. I mean, I think Robbie's still laughing at the Emperor's New Groove, but that was a highlight.
Yeah, Jason just goes, "I am a llama." Just killed me. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I need to quit reading the comments.
Hang on, I'll put the wrong. Here we go. There we go, Jason.
Excellent, Jason.
Well done. Maybe you can be the red zone coach as well, there, Jason. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from there, Adam. I can see where you're coming from. I think I'd agree with it more if I thought there was actually a chance of like us just sort of seeing through this and then a change happening to move this team forward, or that the team could actually make the right appointment. I mean, look, I don't know. Maybe it's very easy to say after the Dolphins come back today, but it's just something about Mike McDaniel that I just find fascinating and interesting. And I don't know, I'd be quite excited to see what he could have brought to the Seahawks and see what
he looks like a Poindexter.
Yeah. Yeah, but we've got we'll do about another 10 minutes. If everyone's got another super chat, send them in, get them sent in, and we'll read those questions out. Again, it can be about the draft as well as the team if you want to. Anything on board. You can even just, if you want a statement you want to make, throw it in there as well. So you asked about Drew Lock, Robbie. I don't think Pete Carroll is going to turn to Drew Lock. I think that he has a million points in the bag for Geno Smith, in that he's going to have a long leash. I think he's going to get half a season, pretty much. I mean, I say that if they go scoreless for another 4 quarters in the next game, I reserve the right to change that opinion, because eventually you have to say enough's enough. You can't just keep having scoreless games. So that may well change, but I think he's going to stick with him. But I don't know. I don't think he'd be any better with Drew Lock, Robbie, but I think it might be more interesting just to see how it goes. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
I don't think Geno Smith's the biggest problem. I think the offense is the main problem, and I don't think giving Drew Lock this is is not going to be. It's going to be a thankless task anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to see, there's some things that I'd like to see Geno do if he's going to stay quarterback, step up into the pocket a little bit. There's a couple things that, he stands flat-footed quite a bit and especially when he's just making his reads, needs to move around a little bit more. But that being said, I mean, I don't think he's ultimately the problem. I've seen people saying, when is Drew Lock going to start? I'm not saying he should. I'm just, Drew Lock's going to throw probably a lot of interceptions. And I just think it would be, if we're just going to keep losing and this is the kind of game we're going to be playing, I'd rather see somebody out there who's a gunslinger. Throw it around. Let's see it. It'd be more fun. That's all.
Yeah. It's just not that what you just said there, Robbie, is like the antithesis of everything Pete Carroll. I just want to see a gunslinger throwing it out there. Like Pete would much rather have them throwing into the flat on 3rd and 12 like they did today, or when you're trailing 20 points to 7, and you have the ball in your own half, and you run it 3 times, and your 3rd and 4 play involves Geno Smith on a run pass option, and he runs it and comes up short, and then you punt. That's more like his way of doing things, I think. That and asking DJ Dallas to throw the ball.
That was what I was about ready to say. I was give DJ Dallas the ball. Let him throw it a couple more times.
Wowza. Yeah. And look, I'm sorry to everybody that this has ended up being more of a Pete Carroll analysis than just the game itself. But I don't know. I mean, it's just hard. And that you've got that. I mean, I think there's 2 things going on with the fan base at the moment, Adam. I think a lot of people are enjoying the fact that it started badly for Russell Wilson. And I get part of that is because we have Denver's 1st and 2nd round pick next year, and people are rightly so eager for Denver to be bad so that the Seahawks can get a higher pick. I mean, the Denver won in the end today. I don't know how it all ended in the end, but I've seen someone say that I saw just on Twitter a second ago that Wilson had won. But it seems like people are taking a fair bit of enjoyment out of his struggles, which okay. And people are sort of going, draft. It's okay. The draft's coming. And those people have not stayed up till 5 a.m. every weekend like I have watching these bloody players. So they don't really know what's out there. They've just heard great quarterback class and don't actually know whether the solution is there. And I would suggest that it's not clear whether the solution is there so far after 3 weeks to college football season. And I don't know. Those 2 things to me don't get me going, Adam. They don't make the juices flow for me. I can't at the moment because I am watching a lot of the quarterback prospects. It hasn't been what I think people expected. And with the Wilson stuff, I just don't care. I'm not invested in Russell Wilson failing. I don't care. I mean, I want Denver to give us a nice pick, but aside from that, I'm not bothered.
Yeah, I think the interesting part is that when you say I don't care, I'm not bothered, I have a feeling that a not insignificant proportion of the fan base feel that about the Seahawks season. I think, there's a lot of people that are saying, 1-16, great. Maybe that's a bit of a Twitter bubble. And when you're entrenched in a sort of hot takey social media society that we're all a part of, stuff like that gets exacerbated. But, I don't think I don't think the stadium will be full again this season. I certainly don't think you'll see the fervor that there was on Monday night. I feel like Monday was seen as a bit of a micro season that win that, and it's almost a success. And I don't know. I think it's hard. It's hard to expect too much when, in general, you're right. People are talking draft, or, our next quarterback, our next this, our next that. Everyone is looking ahead because deep down, there's no championship team in place at the moment. So what else are you going to do apart from look ahead to the next one? We've tasted glory. This isn't a team that hasn't been at the pinnacle. And actually, my biggest gripe of the whole thing is that I don't think a coach that's been there for over a decade should have no plan in place. Once one era, I don't think Pittsburgh would be this bad. I don't think the Patriots would be this bad after moving on from their guy. I think it's been fairly negligent to be in a position where there's nothing there really. once the quarterback's gone. But I can't get too fired up about this because I don't think this feels that much of a surprise to see the team play like this. The surprise actually was to see how they played in the first half, because they looked like a JV team. They did not look ready to play an NFL game, and that's one thing I don't expect to see from a Pete Carroll team. I thought they shored it up in the second half a bit, but the first half really surprised me, and I think Pete would be disgusted with some of the stuff that he saw then, even if we could probably all see it coming, because that's maybe what the talent level is. I would imagine he's quite surprised by what he saw there.
A super chat from Jonathan here. No comment on it, just supporting us with a 449. I don't know if maybe he's a 49ers fan, or maybe he's just having a bit of fun there. But thank you for that. And if anybody has a super chat they want to chuck in before the end, question or something, we'll come straight to it. I think, Robbie, I should qualify a little bit because people are I've seen a couple of questions in the chat now about quarterbacks and stuff like that. I should just qualify it briefly. And I'm going to go into this a bit more. I've written a big article today, which is going to come out tomorrow on Monday, sort of with some thoughts on the college weekend and the quarterbacks that I watched. 3 weekends. I've never watched as much college tape than the last 3 weekends. It's ridiculous. And I'll give my latest thoughts on what I've seen with the quarterbacks. I think the problem is, Robbie, is that people have been told and told and told by the media that this is an amazing quarterback class. And I saw Matt Miller, he of the Seahawks have had the worst draft ever, 2012 comment. He was saying what an amazing deep class of quarterbacks it is. And there's these, and I spoke to this executive and he said it's the sheer numbers that are there. I'm not sure that this class is going to be as amazing as everybody's saying. I think that there are players you can draft with the belief that they can turn into starting NFL quarterbacks. And then there are players who are overrated, and there are players who don't belong in the conversation at all, but are being thrust in there by the non-stop chatter that is the NFL draft. I am not watching college football right now and seeing a Joe Burrow, let's say. When you were watching Joe Burrow play for LSU, you were thinking, wow. And I know the Bengals are 0-2 today, but you were watching him and thinking, this guy is amazing. He is legit. It's very hard to find flaws with him. And I'm watching the current crop, and I can say that CJ Stroud is extremely talented, but I want to see him be consistent and less erratic and more accurate on an intermediate level when he's not playing Toledo and whoever they played last week. Will Levis is a brilliant quarterback with great physical traits. He's mastered a pro-style offense. I think he's got everything that you need to be successful, but he continues to throw interceptions. I'm not that worried about the interceptions he's thrown this year. I think, there are good and bad interceptions, and I don't think his have been particularly bad. Do I watch him and think this is the next Josh Allen or Justin Herbert? Not necessarily. I think he could be sort of a diet version of them. But then after that, there's a lot of question marks to everybody else. And if you are not picking first and second overall, there's no guarantee that you're going to get at these guys. And it seems to be a lot of teams right now who need a quarterback. So what I'm saying, Robbie, is if there are people out there thinking all we've got to do is get through this year, I'm not sure it's as simple as that.
No, I agree. The only thing I'm just going to touch on the Will Levis thing real fast. The only thing that worries me about Will Levis throwing interceptions, I think he's a fantastic. He's my guy. He's my fantastic guy. I think he's a great prospect, and that's exactly what it is, right? He's a prospect, and I think that's what all these quarterbacks are. They're just a prospect. They're not a guarantee. I mean, you can look at Trevor Lawrence and think like he was like surefire best quarterback to come out a long time, right? Since Peyton Manning or whatever. And last year he looked like he didn't even love the game. It looked weird. He didn't look very great. It looks a lot better this year, but there's no guarantee when drafting these quarterbacks. The problem with Will Levis that I have is that I worry that the interceptions will make Pete go, no, I don't want to draft a guy who throws interceptions. That's the part that worries me. He could be the best quarterback, and I think Pete would be scared away of those interceptions. Maybe not, but that's my only worry about the interceptions.
Well, then Pete will never draft anybody.
Right.
Pete will never draft a quarterback in the first round if he's worried about that. Because I want to read it out. I'm sorry. And Adam, if you, and Robbie, if you need to shoot at any point, just wave your arms furiously and we'll say, but I want to get through this because I think it is an important point, and I want people to sort of understand this, because if we're having this conversation now, I want people to. So in Patrick Mahomes' final year at Texas Tech, he had a run of 6 straight games with an interception. And he lost 7 games in his final year. And Patrick Mahomes had 25 interceptions in his last 2 seasons in college. So if interceptions are a problem, Pete would have never drafted Patrick Mahomes. I don't believe that, frankly. I think Schneider would have convinced him otherwise. And all of the talk, John Schneider's done a great job letting the media know that I love Patrick Mahomes, by the way. I like that guy. So he's done a great job getting that message out there. Andrew Luck's final year at Stanford, he ended with a run of 6 straight games with an interception. Josh Allen had 21 interceptions in his final 2 years in college and a completion percentage of 56.3%. He had 3 sub-100-yard passing games in his final year in college. And even Russell Wilson had 25 interceptions in his final 2 years at NC State. So all of the college quarterbacks throw interceptions. Now, the game has changed in the last 10 years, whereby it's never been easier to throw the ball. We've seen interceptions come down at the NFL level dramatically over the years. And it's got even more so in college. So that's why it's a little bit alarming to see these players throwing interceptions. But you can't, and listen, I don't think Pete Carroll's going to, because, for example, the 2 that Levis had on Saturday, one is the receiver doesn't run through his route and the defender makes a good play. And it's very hard to sort of look someone off to the right, then come back to the left, throw basically blind. And if the receiver hasn't run the proper route, then you're going to get picked off. So that wasn't really on him. The second one is all on him. He's leaning back, the pass sails because his technique's crap. But then neither of those interceptions are as bad as Anthony Richardson just staring down his guy and throwing it straight to him and not seeing a defender who was not hiding in the tall grass, who just stood there. And neither of those interceptions are as bad as Bryce Young's, where he has all the time in the world, for some reason scrambles out the pocket, probably because he's only 5'10", and then just decides, I'll just throw this downfield. So I'm playing UL Monroe, and I'll just throw it straight to a defender. So neither of those picks were as bad as that. So you kind of have to, and one of his interceptions, Will Levis against Florida, was counted as an interception. It was a sack fumble, and it shouldn't have been counted as an interception.
Okay, point made. I understand where you're coming from. I was just mostly saying it just because the way Pete has been talking about protect the football, seeing somebody throwing, that's like, I'm literally, that's the only thing I worry about Will Levis. Yeah. I think he could go out there and dominate. And they were interested in, they were interested in Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, all these guys. So, I mean, you make a good point. I guess the only thing that I was saying is the quarterback classes are never guaranteed, right? So they're never guaranteed. They're prospects for a reason. And, you can't just look at it and be like, well, we're going to get one of these quarterbacks, if everyone's saying it's a great quarterback class, you can't just say, well, we're going to get one of them and all of a sudden we're going to be amazing. It's not going to happen. We've got holes everywhere that we need to fill.
That's a good point, isn't it, Adam, that he makes? Because Robbie makes a very good point. Trevor Lawrence does not look like Trevor Lawrence. People expected Trevor Lawrence to look. People expected Trevor Lawrence to look like Joe Burrow. And Trevor Lawrence, even with the win today against Indianapolis, does not look great right now. He's been handed a hospital pass with Jacksonville, but there's no guarantee that Seattle's one will be in a position to draft the quarterback that they want next year. And if they're not, let's say they're drafting like 6th, 7th, and the top 2 or 3 guys are gone by then, and they can't trade up because the top 2 or 3 teams maybe need a quarterback really badly. What then? Are we having another year of this next year? What then? Is it too soon to be concerned about that? Maybe it is.
I think it has to be a constant concern. I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, last 3 or 4 years, guys that have come out as, first round, these are the new franchise quarterbacks. I mean, there's a 25% success in inverted commas rate of players that are good, and we have 15% success rate of guys that are genuinely franchise quarterbacks. And then, something that is perhaps not I've not studied it, but in general, quarterbacks seem to get injured much more now than the old guard that came out. I don't think you're likely to draft the guy and see him just play 17 games a year for 10 years in a row. So even if they get, a high pick, the chances of the guy being a franchise quarterback are not huge. And then the chances that he's going to lead you straight away. Even Burrow, took him 2 years to really come to the fore. Trevor Lawrence, 18 months in, now starting. And he was seen as the most surefire prospect out of college since Andrew Luck. I'm slightly out of my depth talking about college quarterbacks coming into the NFL, but if you look at how the young guys come in, I don't feel like these transcendent players. Like, I don't feel like it's that sort of league anymore, where you just draft the 6'5" passer who just can sling it all over the place and is going to change the game. It doesn't seem to me like that's the way the NFL really is anymore.
Yeah, and as you were speaking, it reminded me a little bit of 2018, where there was a lot of hope for Sam Darnold, and he was the next big thing, and a lot of hope for Josh Rosen, who was just he never even got his foot through the door, did he? Really, at Arizona, and then he got moved off because they were terrible, and then Baker Mayfield's been a bust and looks bang average in 2 spots now. And the player of all of those guys, Josh Allen, and I suppose Lamar Jackson to a lesser extent, have looked really good. But you go into these things and you just don't know. And I can sit here and tell you that CJ Stroud could be easily, a really dynamic, fantastic passer. But he's just so streaky on intermediate passing against better teams. And he can do it against Toledo, and he can do it against, who they play, Arkansas State last week. Do it in the, consistently well in the Big Ten and against the big teams, and beat Michigan well this year, and go and prove that you can do it. Is he going to get to Penn State this year and struggle? That's the kind of thing. And with Will Levis, again, I think he's very, very, very good. I think you're going to have to. I think with those 2 guys, you're going to have to be picking very early. And already we've seen Anthony Richardson's fallen off the face of the earth after 1 good game. The guy has thrown 0 touchdowns and 4 interceptions after 3 weeks. He has fallen off the face of the earth. Tyler Van Dyke is not benefiting from Mario Cristobal's offense in the slightest. He is just regressing so much in this offensive scheme, which is very similar to Pete Carroll's.
That's the biggest disappointment for me, by the way, seeing that.
Yeah, and I blame the coach more than the player for that, but the player still has to play better. And then people start saying, is Michael Penix Jr. going to be a first-round pick because he's played well against Michigan State, who had the worst passing defense in college football last year. We had this, Jason came in with a super chat. Schadenfreude on Russ. We've got to find enjoyment somewhere. We're certainly not finding it watching this offense put up 0 points or the defense miss tackles. Thank you for your support there, Jason. Much appreciated, and for the hilarious comment earlier. If anyone has we're going to wrap it up in a second. If anyone has a last super chat, then feel free to send them in. But can I come to you for that, Adam? Sure. I will not really. I don't get much enjoyment out of that. I've said it already. I don't want Denver and Wilson to succeed this year because it hurts the Seahawks draft position. After this year, I couldn't give a toss unless they're playing Seattle. I'm not really bothered. I don't feel like it's Team Seahawks or Team Wilson. I think it's more Team Wilson or Team Carroll now, or to maybe expand it out. Team Wilson and Mark Rodgers, and Team Carroll, Richard Sherman and Doug Baldwin. It kind of how it feels, and I'm kind of like, I just don't want any of this. I just want to watch the Seahawks. I want to go back to that feeling I had in 2012, early 2012, when I was flipping excited about the team that was being built, the prospect of it being really good, seeing the games and sort of having that, an unmatched buzz around the fact that the kickoff is happening. What are we going to see today? And then as it built, and yeah, do you know what? There were still frustrating losses in 2012 and 2013. And there were moments in 2013 where you wondered, are they as good as we all think, when they would lose certain games, or they would struggle against the Rams on Monday Night Football in 2013 on the road and just scrape by, and they nearly blew the NFC Championship game, but it all's well that ends well. Listen, I'm not saying I want to feel like I'm watching a Super Bowl future great, one of the greatest rosters that's ever played the game. I don't expect that level, but I want to tune into the Seahawks and feel genuine, like everyone's in it. Everyone believes and has faith in the coaches, in the GM, in the team, Adam, and that they can move forward. And right now, massive question marks about the team, obviously, and the future because they've got to build it. Massive question marks about the coach. I'm more inclined to give Schneider a bit of a pass just because I think he's had a really good draft this year, and he's not the one picking wildcat plays in the red zone. So, but it feels like there's a lot missing there to sort of have that enjoyment and the belief and the hope for the future.
I have to apologize firstly because my dog is mid going bananas, and I know we're a dog friendly show here, but he definitely wants to go outside, so he might have a comment about Russell Wilson. Funnily enough, he listened close enough.
I think he said it was rough.
Oh yeah, there you go. Very good, Russell Wilson. Very good. I can't be bothered for Team Wilson versus Team Seahawk thing forever because it will get boring. Although I must say, watching kind of waltz in with his pistachio suit on and losing and having to put that back on and not bring a change of clothes was just, an astonishing decision in case he lost. But what it does seem, and my podcast partner Stuart pointed out, that it seemed like at the kickoff on Monday, all of the non-disclosure agreements from the team went out the window and everyone started piling in. I mean, you got Richard Sherman going today, with a little chef emoji where Wilson throws another one in the dirt. Unfortunately, we seem that we are going to be sort of bystanders to watching these drive-bys from ex-Seahawk players on Russell Wilson for the future. I don't know why it's happening. Well, I get why it's happening now, but the one thing that Monday has done, and I think Pete probably stoked the fire with his comments on Tuesday, was it's going to be Wilson against Seattle for a long time, unfortunately. And we're kind of going to be stuck with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is going to be this for a long. I think this whole season is going to be that way. And I think the fact that people do take some enjoyment out of Wilson failing, that it's going to be that way until the end of the season, probably. It's going to be that way, Robbie, until the conclusion and probably beyond that. And I don't know. I have no appetite for that. There was none of that bollocks going on in 2012. There was, as bad as it got was Carroll versus Harbaugh. And that was great because you could really root. You wanted Carroll to beat Harbaugh. You wanted him to have that success. But now it's become Carroll versus ex-player. I've got nothing for that. I just want to see this team moving forward and progressing now. And I do worry a little bit, Robbie, it's going to live in the past a little bit with all of this. It's going to live in the past because Carroll's going to try and want to, roll it back to the glory days and do all that again. And I'm not convinced he can do that. I genuinely believe that there are some. I'm kind of going off on wild tangents, and we should wrap up soon because I've kept you long enough. But I think that I think there's some truth to his philosophy, Robbie, just being a classic philosophy that always worked. Like some of his methods, we all kind of take the piss a little bit out of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, out Pete Carroll, for some of his catchphrases and some of his beliefs being a bit dated. But I do think there are some nuggets of real truth in what he believes, that they will always be timeless. They will always work in the NFL. I mean, he has been around long enough to know that certain things are just true. But at the same time, I do think things can't go on forever. You can't just keep going on and on and on forever as a coach. You do have a shelf life. You do have a shelf life with specific teams. Maybe if Pete wanted to go and have another go at this, he should have had a go somewhere else, Robbie. Maybe, and I also wonder if he was well up for that. I mean, there was all of a sudden there was that being linked with UCLA in the off season and stuff like that, and he was talking to the LA Times this time last year, and you trying to insert himself into the USC conversation. They went and got a vastly superior option in a guy who's probably going to make them national contenders within 1 year. So I think he may well have been keen to move on, and they might have benefited from that, and it just hasn't happened. And I don't know. I just think I don't want to be stuck in the Wilson versus Carroll thing. I don't want to be stuck in the past. I want to believe in it and have an excitement again in this team. And seeing that today, how long do we have to wait for that?
Yeah. Well, just real fast on the Wilson thing. I think, I don't know I think it was Richard Sherman one time, and it was just like a quick little blurb he gave out. He goes, the 30 for 30 that they do on the Seahawks is going to be really interesting. And I think I'm really excited to see that whenever that comes out in, way down the line and Pete's gone and everyone's gone, it'll be interesting to know.
I hate that.
I
Sorry,
love
Robbie.
that.
Sorry to interrupt. I hate that comment because I feel like we bloody know everything already. Doug
I mean, I
Baldwin,
feel like I
stop
do.
talking about it. Like Richard Sherman's done. How many like exposés does Richard Sherman have to do with like Seth Wickerman or Greg Bishop before you actually think we've heard it all? Now we all know that they think he's disingenuous. We all know that they think Carroll gave him special treatment. We all know about Sherman saying this and calling him he's saying he effing sucks. We all know about how Carroll dealt with the pass play. We all know that they didn't think he was like black enough, or whatever that means. We all know everything. Like they said, "Oh, give us a great 30 for 30." I feel like we're going to sit there and go, "Yeah, I know that you think that. I know that you think that. And I know that you think that." I think we've heard it all. They've not stopped
I know, but I think
banging
it'll
on
be
about it
interesting to
for
hear from
years.
other people. I think it'll be interesting to hear from other people. You're right. There's going to be a lot that we already know, but there's going to be some nuggets that we don't know. I mean, I have a hard time believing that it's all just those things. There's got to be more to it. That's my thing that I think. But and then also with the Wilson versus Carroll this year, I actually think it's done. It was the first game. The only thing we were going to care about now. Yeah, I mean, listen, I looked at the Broncos stats line earlier, and Russ was like 6 for 22 for like 93 yards and a pick. I don't know why I took a little bit of enjoyment out of that, just because I was like, okay, maybe we dodged a bullet. Maybe we're like, now we got all these draft picks. Maybe the Broncos are going to suck and we're going to have another higher pick. I don't have anything against Russell Wilson, but I don't want to see him succeed this year because I want a higher draft pick. And like you said, next year I could give 2 craps after that. I don't care. But this is the year that I want to see him fall apart and we get a better pick for it. That's really the only reason.
Yeah, a couple of final thoughts. I think the first one is, off the back of what you said there, Robbie, I think you could easily make an argument that the Seahawks have done the right thing in moving on from Russell Wilson. That ultimately, because of the way that he's playing, that they got out at the right time, they got the best deal that they could, and that might have been the best. And that this decision to trade him may well prove to be the best thing that Seahawks could do, and Denver could live to regret it. Completely on board with that take. My only fear is, are the right people in place to make the most of that haul that they got in return? That's the concern that I would have. A couple of final super chats that have come in at the end to finish. Rich says, the best thing is to do the basics better, just hoping for some intensity and sound football. Agree with that completely, Rich. Just do that. Back to and I thought that's what we were going to get. Back to basics. Get the little things right. Play physical, play intense. Not asking DJ Dallas to throw the ball in the red zone. That's not back to basics. And I agree with Rich for that. And thank you for your super chat. It is much appreciated. I think there is one more. Yes, there is. Mike, big time support of the channel. Mike, great to have you. Thanks for the weekly breakdown. Thoughtful analysis and conversation as always. Still numb from all the bad penalties and other self-inflicted wounds. Yeah. I think that is my final thought, guys. And I'll let you have a final thought as well. It had to be the bloody Niners, didn't it? They're just such a fun team to beat. And there was never even an opportunity to get excited tonight. I will say this, though. In England, for us to watch the games, you either have to be watching on something called Game Pass, or you have to have a subscription to something called Sky Sports. And this is how little Sky Sports were interested. They scheduled the game to be their featured late game. So it was going to be on the TV in the UK. They then spent the first quarter showing Red Zone instead of it. And because they have the rights, they blacked it out on Game Pass. So we couldn't watch the first quarter here in the UK. And when it finally got back on, I kind of wish they'd never bloody bothered. Adam, have you got a final thought?
Final thought. I think that actually the super chats have probably been more sort of insightful about the game this evening than we have with our ramblings about coaches and existential and longer term problems. There have been some great points. And I think the idea of, get back to basics and don't give away penalties and just do those things to get better. My worry is that I feel that sometimes can reduce players to robots and of course, just do the basics well and don't drop the ball and throw and catch and don't give away penalties. We're yet to see if the talent is there to not do that. Bless him, Kobe Bryant, I'm sure is going to be a good player at some point. Right now, he's just not good enough to be doing what he's doing. And getting into the basics is all very well, but he's not up to it yet. And as long as he's out there being told to do it, it's going to be a 15-yard penalty for pass interference every time. Who else could you say the same for? Abe Lucas. Don't be an eligible man downfield, but he's a rookie. It's going to happen. And I think there has to be a little bit of acceptance that with these young players, basics are probably the hardest thing for them to master as opposed to the easiest.
I have one other extra thought, Robbie, before we come in. Whose idea was it to have Nick Bosa unblocked as often as he was today? Just ridiculous. That's another reason why the coaching staff deserves a kick up the backside. Robbie, your final thought.
No, I was going to echo what I'm saying. I think not just even the super chats. I've been reading a lot of comments, which I typically don't do, but I've been reading a lot, and there's been a lot of good discussion going on. And I don't know who it was, but I see you guys, loud chatting with your caps saying offense line and defense line. I get it. Yeah. I mean, you're right. We need to, beef up that line and I have some hope for our two new bookend tackles. I think they could be good and there's some promise there, but the interior is rough. It's going to be interesting playing Aaron Donald when we play the Rams. It's going to be ugly. So, there's some things to worry about there. Appreciate you guys just, with the discussion and watching. And my only thought is we got the Falcons next, right? So see what happens if we can stop the run and wrap up. I'd like to see some basics too. I mean, especially just wrapping up and tackling.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Robbie. You reminded me there that we're going to play Aaron Donald twice this year. That's exactly what we needed to hear right now off the back of that. Ah, dear. Yeah. I'll echo what Robbie said. Thank you to everybody who's been joining. The live chat has been alive and it has avoided some of the nonsense that you sometimes get in these things. And great to see the numbers that have been watching live as well. Just thank you to everybody who has been tuning into these and really appreciate it. Thank you to all the super chats. And for those of you subscribing, the subscriptions are going up. So keep going. If you haven't subscribed yet, stay tuned. I am going to have an article on SeahawksDraftBlog.com on Monday, which is a massive breakdown. It's 3,500, 4,000 word breakdown of the quarterbacks from this weekend. I will do a video on that as well. And then I am heading off to Italy because I am glutton for punishment. Watching the Seahawks play this way is not enough for me. I have to go and watch England get their asses kicked by Italy as well in Milan. So when I'm back from that, more college football, then I get to see them have their asses kicked by Germany on Monday as well. So there we go. Thank you for everybody joining in. As I mentioned, subscribe. Don't forget to like the video as well. Big thank you to Adam and to Robbie. Check out the Pedestrian podcast, which Adam is a big part of as well. Until next time, bye for now. See you soon.